I'm
Stop.
also,
Please hit
yes.
record. Ah, yeah. Great.
Oh, okay. Recording. All right. Yes, sure. We agreed. So, yeah, hello to everybody. And I'm very glad to be here and to be talking on what I'm doing quite some part of my time. Um, Let me share my screen with
Mm.
you for a start. So I hope you can see the presentation now. Perfect, wonderful. So why did I offer this topic to the community of practice? So when I started working with schema work, let me call it schema work and not schema therapy, because I only added schema therapy to my portfolio recently, but I started working with the model quite like more or less 10 years ago. Um, I realized that it is a very, very valuable model for everybody who is in practical work with other people, like facilitators, coaches, conflict mediators, social workers, and I had quite a lot of experience in coaching at this point of time, but I haven't been a therapist at this point of time when I started working with schema work. So I started together with a colleague of mine. She was the one who got into this earlier, and we started to adapt it for coaching. And we did it. We also were both. We have always been both pretty much on the resource-oriented side of working with people, and less on the, let's say, negative left act matrix side of working with people. So we have always been more in activating resources and what came with a positive shift in psychotherapy later. So we started developing methods and applications for working with the model, the same model the schema therapists use for their therapeutic application. We started working with this for strengthening normal people in their everyday um, difficulties, in their everyday um, uh, tasks, because maladaptive schemata is something everybody has. It is not something that is partial to people who suffer from psychological illnesses. So it is, and it is as ever in coaching, you have a lot of people who have quite difficult problems ahead of them, and they struggle to come to grips with them, and they don't know where to go with it exactly, because it's not a psychotherapeutic issue they have on their on the table, but it is something where they can't go on, something that stops them in achieving their goals. So this was the starting point. And since then, I have been working a lot with social workers and also attorneys and conflict mediators. So people who can profit from, on one point, understanding what a dysfunctional or maladaptive schema is and what it does to people in interaction, and also to get a self-reflection on what are my dysfunctional maladaptive schemata, how do I identify them, and what do I do with them when I happen to be caught in them in a specific situation. And there was one time when I had a medical doctor, actually. He was very self-conscious and he was doubting himself a lot, and because he had a situation with a patient of his where he had to to tell him a very severe diagnosis, and the patient completely lost it, let's say it like this. And he hadn't had this experience before, and this made him doubt his entire people skills, and he became so self-conscious that he had really difficulties entering his practice, because he didn't know how to relate to his patients anymore, because it made him so self-conscious, this issue that he had kicked someone in such a bad psychological state by his actions, obviously, by transmitting a message that he couldn't hand over in a way the other person could somehow handle it, that he started doubting himself profoundly. And just knowing about what is a maladaptive schema, in how could he identify that this was something that happened within the patient and wasn't his fault. And this made him able to, again, come to grips with himself, put aside the self-doubt, and go back into his practice and be a practitioner. So it's a lot. This is why I wanted to offer this topic. It's about understanding how people can switch from one second to the other to a very, very bad, very, very stressed state, and how this has nothing to do with fault, but how this can be understood and explained from the very personal socialization, from the learning history of the person, and also some ideas, how can I handle this in a group context, when this happens in a group context. Because like with conflict mediators or with coaches, often we have, or especially with a community of practice here, you often work with groups, and still people might happen to fall into their maladaptive schematas. So I found it very helpful knowing about this. I found it helpful to have something up my sleeve to be able to do whenever this happens. So this is the idea why I wanted to share. So let me start. I have quite some slides, but I will go over them relatively quickly. Whenever you have questions, please ask them when they arise, because it's easier for me to ask them when they are there and not in the end and jump back and forth. So that would be appreciated. My goal is for you to get a basic understanding of the schema model. And also, after a little conversation with Paul, I dug into how relate individual schemata to groups. So I did a little digging again, and I have a little bit, but this is a very, very small field of research. But there is some interesting, let's say, seeds of research which I want to share with you. So the start is, what is a schema? The schema concept itself has been present in psychology for decades by now. It's nothing entirely new. It's nothing the schema therapists developed out of the blue. So the model has been present since the late 1960s. And there are, when you start looking into this schema concept, you find quite a lot of different ideas, but I put together what the different ideas share. So this is it is seen as being part of the human behavior repertoire. It is behavior that is acquired, and it's an individual process acquired over the course of learning. It is a behavior, it is something that affects the individual behavior on all layers of behavior. So it includes thinking, it includes feeling, and wanting. This is a translation mistake, I'm sorry. Wanting. So the impulse to get into action. And it is reproducible. So you have a trigger triggering the behavior, you have inner structure within the behavior, and you have behavioral consequence from the behavior. And usually I start with, let's have a look now, what is a habit, what is a behavioral pattern, what is a schema, what is an addiction. We won't go into that now, but let's just brushing my teeth in the evening. Just when I see these bullet points, brushing my teeth in the evening, every evening, could fulfill what is written down there. But this is not what a schema means. A schema means something else. A schema means that there is an actual trigger for an automated reaction that starts an emotional reaction within the brain, that starts connected beliefs that are immediately starting to spin off within the brain, and the connection between emotional reaction and beliefs that are switched on from now to the next second start is a certain, a specific behavioral intention. And it is connected. It is part of the human behavior repertoire to reduce complexity. It is one of the habitual behavioral patterns we learn during our socialization, and it saves energy, accelerates behavior. And as the schemata in schema works are seen as a very adaptive process for very difficult situations a person finds oneself in, it is intimately connected to stress and stress reactions. So the schema in the schema model, also the schema therapists use, is seen as a neuroexcitatory pattern. So it is always present, but it's not always activated. So you have like a neural circuit that is always there. It's a structure, or this is the theory, it is a structural something within the brain, but you don't always have excitation running through it. So it can be activated and it cannot be activated. So whenever a schema is activated, you have exactly these experiences. You have the cognitions, you have the emotions, you have the physiological reactions, including the sensations, and also the impulses to act. So a schema is invisible because it's a neuronal structure, and which can be switched on and switched off in behavior which we see. And it is neither positive nor negative. It is an adaptation to a socialization situation a person found oneself in. And it's not like with trauma, it's not like a one-time learning, but it is a learning that occurred over the course of socialization in childhood and youth. So it is a repetitive learning in regard to very specific socialization situations, which we will have a look at in a moment. And this recurring experiences with certain types of human interactions lead to learning how should I react within such situations in general. So it used to be an adaptive behavior in whatever situation the child found oneself in. It used to be adaptive to this special situation, to this special social circumstance. And as it is a structure that develops over time, it doesn't disappear when the child changes the environment in adulthood, for example. So when the child leaves a dysfunctional family as a youth or in young adulthood, the schemata already exist and they take them with them, even as they change the environment. And they stay with them and they can be activated anytime. And then the behavior starts. Something happens, something triggers this special neuronal excitatory pattern, The behavior just runs through, even though the situation is not anymore the same as it was, where the behavior used to be adaptive. So this is why we name it maladaptive schemata in adulthood, when the reactions that used to be adaptive just become maladaptive due to changing the environment you live in. And these schemata act like selection attractors. You can imagine them like glasses you put on and you sort your environment with. So it's like highlighting everything that has to do with attachment, highlighting everything that has to do with autonomy issues. Or so I will show you the different domains where schemata are can happen to become. It is this I already said. So a dysfunctional schema. This is from Jeffrey Young, who developed the schema therapy together with colleagues in the US. And so his definition is a dysfunctional schema is a broad and comprehensive theme or pattern that develops in childhood or adolescence and intensifies over the course of one's life, which is highly dysfunctional and consists of memories, emotions, cognitions, and bodily sensations related to the individual themselves and their interaction with other people. The development of this pattern is linked to functional or dysfunctional interaction experiences with basic psychological needs during childhood, and adolescent socialization is influenced by individual traits. So this is the first time we have the concept of needs coming into the model. Jeffrey Young worked with highly dysfunctional patients with very severe personality disorders, and his starting point of thought was, how does personality come into being? When you are born, you have like personality traits, you have a temperament, you have something you bring with you in this world, but you don't have a fixed personality. This is something that develops over the course of time. How can this be that some people develop a personality disorder? And how can this be that personality disorders develop in similar ways? Although over different cultures over the world, how can this be? There must be an explanation within the interaction of the child and the environment over the course of time, how personality disorders come into being. And he came up with the look at the psychological needs. So when I start working with new groups, I often start with this slide. I decided to give you first a little theoretical introduction, because we have more an academic background in this situation. So what is schema about? This is what people experience when they are in a schema reaction. It is the feeling that usually I have everything under control. Only sometimes, for example, when someone raises their voice in a discussion, I lose it. And I feel like a child right in front of a lion, and I do not know what to do anymore. And then in this situation, it would have been the raising of the voice that kicked the person into his or her maladaptive schema reaction. And this is what happens. It happens emotionally. We fall back into, it's a regression. We regress into the feeling of the childhood or adolescence situations in adolescence when the schemata were formed. And we are we have as many competences in this moment as we had when the schema formed. So people tell you, when you ask people when they react interestingly, and you get the idea of, well, this might have been a maladaptive schema reaction, let's see about that, and you ask them, how old did you feel in this situation? Did you feel the age you actually are? People tell you, no, I felt like 5 years old, or I felt like 10 years old. And this is a very good way, for one point, if you want to explain about maladaptive schemata, and so they have they can relate emotionally to, oh yes, I fell back, I regressed in the situation, and I didn't have contact to my resources I usually have. I couldn't act freely anymore. I just felt like a 5-year-old caught in a situation standing in front of a lion. So this is how it feels for the people. How can I differentiate whether a reaction is more due to a maladaptive schema or due to chosen behavioral? So when I get the impression that the reaction doesn't seem adequate considering the situation, it is too strong, it is too loud, it is too aggressive, it is too whatever. When I get in retrospect, I find it still when I find it, oh, I'm on the wrong side of my bullet points. I'm sorry. So when the reaction seems adequate, it is not schema related. When in retrospect, I find it was a good idea to react like this, it's rather not a schema reaction. It can be a strong reaction, but when the situation is all right to show a strong reaction, then it's not a schema reaction. And also very important, other people would have reacted or do react just as I did, or just as this person did in such a situation. Not every intense reaction qualifies as a schema reaction, not at all. It's always a question of looking at the situation and looking at the adequacy of the behavior that occurred. So what is rather schema related? And now we come to the other side. When the reaction seems excessive, then it's rather a schema reaction. When many other people react much more calmly in such situations, when the situation keeps happening, and this is a very, very telling point, when the behavior keeps happening, even though I already decided I do not want to show this behavior anymore. So this is something I have never met any person who couldn't relate to this. I don't know anyone who doesn't have here or there maladaptive schema reactions. Say, yes, I know what you're talking about. I didn't want to shout at my children, and still I did it again, for example. And then we have, after having shown this behavior, there's often shame. And there is more or less immediately the realization, oh no, I did it again. And getting annoyed at oneself. So it puts people first, it puts them in the whatever reactions they show, which they often didn't want to show anymore. And afterwards, it makes them ashamed. And other people complain about the behavior and give negative feedback and tell to stop this behavior, for example. So this is how you can identify whether a reaction is rather schema related in comparison to a freely chosen reaction. I would give you a few minutes for just reflecting with each other on where you have experienced yourself or witnessed a maladaptive schema reaction. Just a few minutes so you can see whether you can apply the concept for yourself to situations, and then we come back, and whether there have arisen questions we can clarify. Just a few minutes. So let me see. I will stop this. So thumbs up. Perfect. So this is a very important point. A schema reaction usually is not formed by trauma. It is very seldomly formed by actual trauma. Usually it is just social interaction with regard to, this is the next point we come to, with regard to emotional and psychological needs. So it is a lot of difficult interactions with regard to the psychological needs, basic needs, that repeatedly frustrated this need, and it's not necessarily traumatic. So this is why everybody has them, even though trauma is part of human life. But you don't have to ever have experienced anything that would qualify as trauma, and still you usually have maladaptive schemata. Okay, so let me share the presentation again. There it is. So now we come to the basic needs, and I know there are theories of basic psychological and basic emotional needs, like a lot of them, and there are different traditions in different parts of the world. And for now, this is something I'm very deep into, but for now I just stick with the nomenclature that Jeffrey Young found, with the ones Jeffrey Young picked, as he is the most famous representant for working with this model, and he developed the model in this special way. So I stick to the needs he picked. The first need he picked was connection. The second is autonomy, and it also includes, if you look into it, it includes what Dici and Ryan see as control. This is within. And impaired limit, or rather the need for limits. Then he has the need for assertion and the need for play and spontaneity. Those are the needs he identified working with severely impaired patients with personality disorders. And so when you get into a social environment with parents who cannot connect, for example, like they themselves are have a psychological illness, they have a severe depression, they are suffering from a severe depression or whatever, and they cannot relate, they cannot build connection to the child because they are not able to, then the child continuously gets frustrated in this need, and you cannot put the need aside. And each of the needs, when the need is fulfilled, it gives a certain type of well-being. And if the need is not fulfilled, it gives a certain type of unwell-being. And if you can usually, if you imagine, okay, it feels different to be frustrated in needing connection, wanting to feel someone close, being included into a group or in a bond, or in a personal bond, and not getting this feels different from not getting to act autonomous. It's a completely different emotional reaction to not being allowed to act autonomous or not getting human connection. So you cannot, by offering the child or the adolescent, offering a lot of autonomy, but withholding connection, it still will form maladaptive schemata within the domain of connection, because you cannot exchange one need for the other. It's not possible. So if you do not get connection, Jeffrey Young says you get schemata that are that give the feeling of disconnection and rejection. If you do not get autonomy, the schemata circle around impaired autonomy, impaired performance, impaired identity. I don't go into why, but it makes a lot of sense from a theoretical point of view. If you do not get adequate limits and do not learn about adequate limits, you get a schemata around impaired limits. And if you get, if you do not get the option to actually be your own person, you get the other directedness. And if you are not able to live out your need for play and spontaneity, you get overvigilance and inhibition. Those are the so-called domains schemata are formed in. We have a very short look at the schemata that are worked with in the field. And this is also what we work with in schema coaching, because it's just helpful to have a model. No one says this is perfect. No one says it's right to have picked these needs. There's a lot of discussion in every regard, but it works. It's a model for practitioners and it works. So the first domain, experiences of disconnection, rejection, you have 5 different schemata. You have the experience of abandonment and instability. You have the experience of mistrust and abuse. You have emotional deprivation. You have defectiveness and shame. And you have social isolation and alienation. So they're always connected, like sentences and beliefs that have been put into the brain of the child due to the interaction with a significant adult or with peers in this sensitive age for forming schemata. So you have, like, for mistrust and abuse, you have something like I am worthless. So when the schema is started within the brain, immediately the conviction is present, I'm worthless. And the person can, in other situations, be a very self-confident, very self-caring, and very good with be a person who's very good with oneself. But when the schema is started, then this is the only thing that is running around in circles in the brain. And you cannot stop it because it is ingrained in this neuronal pathway of the maladaptive schema. With impaired autonomy, impaired performance, and impaired limits, there are theoretical reasons why I put them together. I won't go in there. This is for another day if you're interested. But you have the schemata of dependence and incompetence, so the experience of I cannot do anything alone. For example, vulnerability to harm or illness. Enmeshment, this is like not having boundaries in regard to like a certain parent. Not like sometimes you have adults who cannot at all keep their boundaries, for example, to their mother or their father or whatever. Underdeveloped self. And then you have failure. And with the impaired limits, you have entitlement, grandiosity, and insufficient self-control and self-discipline. So those are some of the beliefs that are going on when the schemata are started. I'll never manage this. Everything is dangerous. I cannot do anything alone. I have to do everything right. I have always to be there. There's no one else who could do this. I have to say the word. And with the impaired limits, you have I am special, so I am allowed to. I don't need to follow any rules. It's not that they do not understand rules, but rules are for others to follow when they are in the schema reaction. And then you have insufficient self-control, self-discipline. I needn't to put up with that. If I do not like it, I don't have to do it. Then we have the experience of other directedness. The names of the schemata are subjugation, self-sacrifice. There are a lot of people in helping professions who can relate to this very, very well. And then you have approval seeking and recognition seeking. So you have beliefs like others don't want to see me and my needs, so I'd better do what they want, otherwise I'll expect punishment. I must take care of everyone, and I always must have something ready to present. Those are experiences, love for achievement. The children have received love and bonding only for showing achievements. And then we have the last schema domain, which is overvigilance and inhibition, where you remember the need was for play and for being able to show emotions in an adequate way. So you have the schemata of negativism, pessimism, emotional inhibition, not showing any emotions at all, unrelenting standards. A lot of people who have issues with perfectionism actually run into their schema reactions on this level. And then you have punitiveness. So there are in the background are beliefs like the world is bad and dangerous, feelings are bad and only get in the way, you shouldn't feel anything, it's just dangerous, or only when I am perfect I am worth anything, and I am evil and therefore I need punishment. This is something somehow I had the idea in my mind, oh, well, this is such a terrible a schema. This I will find this only in very, very destructive families. But this I was taught differently. It's again a medical doctor. I'm working a lot with medical doctors, and I was like, this is a moment where I was like dumbfounded when a coaching client told me, oh, actually I'm very sorry for every beat that missed me. So that was something. So you cannot so it might have given the impression that schemata only come into being in very dysfunctional families. This is not so. They happen to develop everywhere, and it can also just be that the personality traits of the child and the personality traits of the parent just doesn't fit very well. When you have a very outgoing parent, a very someone who loves social interaction, who loves being in groups, and then you have a child that's an introvert, then the way the child would need the need for connection to be fulfilled is very different to what the parent offers. The parent offers a lot of people all the time, a lot of social interaction, but if you have an introvert child, this is stress all the time. The child needs connection, but not in this way. So even with the best wishes for the child, it happens that maladaptive schemata just develop. So you have a lot of information streaming into your sensory organs. You have about 3% actually reaching your capacity to process it. There the input that actually succeeds getting into your system, it is it falls onto your neuronal excitatory patterns. It is the prefrontal cerebral cortex gives a meaning to it, or that it's more complex, but we oversimplify now. It gives a meaning to how should I interpret this situation, how should I interpret this input that is coming into my system now. Then this will decide whether the input works as a trigger for the pattern, whether it is close enough to former situations the child has experienced that the schema is started. Then possibly the schema just runs through with the negative beliefs, with the negative emotion, with the impulse to act. And the reaction is actually completely automatic. You cannot stop it. Once the schema is activated, you run through it once. It's just like you enter a carousel and you cannot get off until it stops again. And these excitatory patterns serve as glasses for what 3% actually enter my my system. So usually we have, when there is too little input, we feel bored and unproductive. We need a little stress to feel pleasantly changed and get into a productive state. But when you have a schema trigger, and it's a little unfortunate that in schema work, it's also the word trigger is used because it gives the association to trauma. But as I said earlier, schema is not trauma. Sometimes you have maladaptive schemata that are also connected to some traumatic events, but this is very rare. Usually it's just socialization. So you have a schema trigger, and the schema trigger puts you immediately over the threshold to extreme stress and puts you into a survival mode. You cannot change it. And as you are in this part of your stress reaction, you cannot just decide to reduce your stress. This is the time it takes for the system to get all the chemical reactions back into line. So, and this takes about 15 to 20 minutes. So whenever someone you're working with runs into a schema reaction, there's often the idea of, well, okay, let's explain it again. It doesn't make any sense to explain anything to someone who is in extreme stress mode, because the neocortex doesn't work adequately during the time you are in an extreme stress reaction. It is just automated behavior, and the areas of the brain that are responsible for producing language and also processing language are part of the neocortex. So whenever someone falls into a maladaptive schema reaction, the best thing you can do is leave them be and wait. Because for about 15 minutes, you won't reach the person. He or she needs to process whatever is going on. And after about 15 minutes, you can come back in and you can start and find out what happened. What did put you onto the left side of the matrix? How did this reaction, what did I do? Did I do anything that put you in this bad place emotionally? And then you can work from there. But during the schema reaction, it doesn't make any sense to try to explain, to try to relate, to try to touch a person. Actually, often this trying to touch someone in an acute severe stress reaction often produces aggressive behavior. So this is the model from how I work with patients. You have triggering situations that are related to your emotional needs, and you learn during childhood that some things you just don't get. Like you do not get love from your parent. They do not want, they are not able to, whatever. You do not get. So whenever you get in a situation where a close person, you might want to get love from a close person. This starts the memories, and it is unconsciously. This starts the memories from not getting my need for connection fulfilled during socialization. I have the need, for example, to be close to my spouse, and even by feeling the need, the memories from socializations are started on an unconscious level. And there is it plays out all the situations I had in regard to this specific need in such situations play out unconsciously within the system. And I fall back into my whatever age I was when I experienced the difficult situations. This happens backstage within the person. This is the emotional reaction. and I hear the internalized negative sentences, the negative messages I receive from the significant adults in these situations. This is what forms the negative beliefs that are connected to the schema reaction. And then I get into automatic behavioral mode, and those are the so-called coping modes. And there are a set of coping modes described, and we'll have a very short look. So you have an idea what kind of behavior can make you sensitive to, oh, this might have been a schema reaction. Here, I shouldn't put it onto my plate that it was me doing something wrong, but this is possibly something that put the person in a very negative emotional state that comes from their socialization. So what usually happens in the brain? We have the prefrontal cortex responsible for inhibition of difficult behavioral impulses. So I put there good behavior. This is part of the neocortex. Usually we have like a sensory input. I chose an acorn. It starts the interpretation. What does it mean? It's an acorn. It comes from a tree, grows in a forest, da, 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 da. Doesn't do anything to me. Oh, very boring, but you have to behave yourself. The prefrontal cortex works just perfectly fine. And then I can act accordingly and adequately. This is what usually works. This is what is called the fit adult mode. I have connection to all my resources. I have connection to all my behavioral options. I can do whatever I want. In a schema reaction, I have the same trigger, the same sensory input, an acorn, but there have been experiences of bullying in the background. So the interpretation is completely different. It is acorn, oh my God, being thrown at, bullying, being excluded from a group, being sad. This floods the neocortex with stress hormones, so it doesn't work anymore. I am not able to access my normal behavioral freedom. I fall into an emotional, very bad place, re-experiencing this on a subconscious level. And the emergency mode, fight, flight, freeze starts, and I cannot act freely, but I act with an automatic reaction from fight, flight, freeze. And I say or do things afterwards I regret. And it is exactly the same sensory input, just different people with different experiences during socialization. So what is the goal? In schema coaching, our goal is to strengthen this fit adult mode, the free and resourceful parts of the person, to strengthen them. And so this is a one-on-one work. We won't go deep into this. It's just so you know the difference to schema therapy. In schema therapy, you have a very strong look on these modes, and you work a lot with the dysfunctional behavior. And in the English-speaking traditions, you also do not work so much with the mode concept, like with these pictures I'm showing you here, but you work much more with actually on a more, with actually the schemata we looked at earlier. In the European tradition, you work more with a mode concept, and the therapists work with the dysfunctional modes mostly. And in schema coaching, we have a big focus on how do I strengthen the fit adult mode or the fit adolescent mode when I work with adolescents. So you continuously keep your connection to your resources. You succeed in staying, even though you get into difficult situations. You realize that, oh dear, this is an old situation. I'm about to fall into my schema reactions, but I know this is old and I can take care of myself. And so keep people, even in situations that could start as schema reactions, keep them able to show freely chosen behavior also outside. The front stage in the schema model is the behavior you can observe from outside. So this is how schema coaching is different to schema therapy on a very basic level. If we put it, I put it for sake of illustration. I connected the adaptive bridge and the schema coaching model. So you could have like someone picked up an acorn. This is the experience I feel challenged from. Then you get on the left side of the matrix, you get the internal reaction of whatever happens backstage from all the negative social interactions that had to do with acorns. And you get the automated behavior on the front. What we want to is internal stop. This is an old reaction. I know where it comes from and I can take care of myself. You get the fit adult mode, taking care of the negative emotions of the inner child and stopping the beliefs that come from the so-called punitive mode. And then you get still free behavior and, for example, a stress reduction behavior. In breath, 1, 2, out breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, now I can act appropriately. I kept myself from falling into my automated reaction, and I can go on acting freely. So this is when we put the adaptive bridge and the schema coaching model, or the schema model, together. So what can you do with this with regard to activate maladaptive schemata when you're working with groups? Now you have the chance to anticipate and recognize what might have been a trigger for someone to fall into a schema reaction. For example, you are in a good working session and suddenly the atmosphere changes and someone starts shouting. Often, shouting is one of the coping modes in a maladaptive schema reaction, for example. And then it's interesting to maybe track back a little and look from a laid back position. Okay, when did it change? What happened that made the atmosphere change? What might have been the schema trigger for this person? And also to know it doesn't make a lot of sense to continue in this second with whatever complex academic input or whatever you have been doing at this moment. It won't land. You have no chance to get through to the person when he or she is in a maladaptive schema reaction. So you go into stress management instead. And one of the very best things you can do whenever you suspect someone of your participants to have fallen into a maladaptive schema reaction is take a break. With whatever reason you find, just take a break. And one of the best things I find is blame myself, say, oh, I need a break. I need something to drink. I need to whatever. And just find a reason to give the person the chance to wind down, to come back into their senses and to be able to process whatever is said to them. Because as long as they are in the schema reaction, they can't process properly whatever you tell them. Annika?
I just wanted to make you aware of Pip's question in the chat. What about when the coach's schema? Yeah, this is what I expected. Right. What about when the coach's schema gets triggered by the coach's reaction?
Yes.
By the coach's reactions. Yeah.
Yes. This is where we come to, because of course you have your own schemata running around, and if you have, for example, perfectionism or something in your bag, then this can happen, that you run into your own schema reactions by someone else's schema reaction. This is called a schema collusion. So often, in my experience, the first step is just knowing about these interaction, just knowing about this is something that happens to people, and it is something that lies in their socialization, in their childhood, in their youth. And it was bad luck that we stumbled over a trigger, and it's not a fault of anyone. And the behavior they show now used to be adaptive to the very difficult situations they were in as a child and as a youth. And it's not their fault that they have this automated reaction in their repertoire. And it's not my fault that we stumbled over a trigger. It is something we will deal with. So this is what usually just knowing about the model, in my experience, helps professionals a lot to not run into their own schema reaction by someone else's schema reaction. And of course, there are, when you find yourself falling into such schema reactions over and over again, and it's not enough to just knowing what happens, then there are interventions, of course. But this is on a whole different, this is nothing for today. Yeah, but it's possible. There are interventions how to work with it. So the next thing that is good to do is just validating emotions and perspectives. So whatever emotions are in the room, just acknowledging they are there. This is something a lot of coaches and facilitators who come from a more work-related background often feel difficult to name emotions. I find in ProSocial it is very common to talk about emotions, luckily, but actually this helps. It helps to name, I am experiencing a lot of tension. I get the feeling, I get the impression you are very angry at the moment. So please just let me step back, let us step back, let us take a break. And then whenever you feel ready, just let's recommence and have a look at what happened. By naming it, it's a way of externalizing the emotion for the person, and it helps to actually wind down quicker. And it can happen that they actually like shout at you, yes, I'm very angry. Say, all right, I got this. I'm sorry that this happened. And so let's just take a step back. I'd like to give you some breathing room, and let's see when we can start again. Annika?
Just to make you aware of the chat again.
I know.
Yeah,
the
okay.
chat. So please tell me.
Yeah. Paul is asking if we have some time to discuss.
It depends. If we want to have a look at the group topic 2, we have no time for discussion. If we leave the group application out, we can discuss. So maybe a quick, what would you prefer? Just raise your hands who'd like to go into discussion now. One.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if we can talk informally about the applications in the context of the group. Would that work for you? I'm wondering if we can talk about applications in groups, but maybe not through the slides. Or
yes, I can stop the. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we can go on for a little bit. If there's any really key stuff that you wanted to say is important in terms of implications for trust and collaboration and relationship building, please take the time. I didn't mean to cut it off, but I also think it'd be great for the group if we had a bit of a chance to have a chat.
Yes. So I just hand it over to you. What are your thoughts on, I mean, you're all professional working with groups, with individuals for years and years. What are your own experiences when you retrack situations where in hindsight you think, oh, this might have been a schema reaction of my client or of myself? So what has helped you? What are your experiences? So let's share a bit.
I really like the point you were making about validating emotions and reflective, like basically reflective listening seems to be one of the few things that can kind of take someone down a notch or two if they're getting worked up.
Yes. Also, I find the deep listening very helpful when the situation is giving the room to do that.
Yeah, what I found helpful is it has also to do with validation, just to sit there and not to judge and not to try to make it go away, but first acknowledge that it's there.
Mm.
What I'm really valuing is kind of, I've applied a lot of those ways of managing, when groups blow up or one person in a group blows up. But I have never kind of really looked at schema as a cause. So it's kind of been really interesting to see how it applies to the natural ways of, or what I find as natural ways of managing kind of groups when they kind of go a little bit pear-shaped. So yeah, it's been very interesting.
Yeah, we often don't think of the childhood kind of patterns that are showing up in the room because it's not discussable. So I like the way this gives it some way of talking about it as an influence within the group.
Yeah, when I've seen it in a group, I always feel the tension between giving the time to reflect, acknowledge, listen to one individual versus the needs of the 19 other people.
Mm.
Yes, this is when this happens, one of the ways how I deal with it is that by nonverbal communication, which is getting like half a step closer to the person in need, and also holding my hand, like I can show it, holding my hand raised a little in their direction. So this gives the feeling of we have a bond, I am with you, and keeping my visual attention on the rest of the group. So this gives to the person who is in emotional need, gives the feeling, okay, she holds me, she's with me, I'm in connection, but I do not need to look at the person directly, and I do not need immediately to put attention to what is happening, but they feel I have been seen. My needs have been realized by the facilitator. And then the group realizes what happens with every participant, of course, and the group's attention goes to the person. And as soon as the group's attention goes to the person in emotional need, I also take my attention, my visual attention to the person, and then I actually ask. So I see you are in need. I see this is a difficult situation for you. And then I make an offer. I make the offer like, would it be better for you to take a break? Would it be better for you to just get some fresh air and drink something? And let's have a chat about this. Let's have a talk about this. And then I give a time frame. This works usually pretty well in my experience. When it happens in conflict mediation, I actually take a break for the whole group because I can't continue when one of the participants isn't cognitively participating because of a schema reaction. Experience.
I really love what you said about when one schema bumps into the other and it's nobody's fault. It just takes the heat out of it for me. And yeah, I'm reflecting back on lots and lots of situations where I could have handled things very differently if I'd understood some of this. So it's very, very helpful, and it will be very helpful going forward. I've been in a few very hot situations in groups, and aware that there was something I was missing in my capacity to respond. So yeah, I really appreciate it. I would actually like to see how you hold your hand, because in my family, my dad used to silence us at the dinner table like this.
Oh, that might actually start a schema reaction.
And yeah, and my sister does it now, and it triggers me. So I would love to see what you do. Okay, thank you.
It is like on the height of my hip, or even a little lower. It's not a big gesture. It's just, it is showing, the fingertips are showing to the person an emotional need. And this communicates perfectly. I see you, I'm with you, I hold you. It works like a charm in my experience.
Thanks.
Welcome. All right. So we just have a few minutes left. I go to a slide to where I think we can wrap up well. And as usually, I had more in my bag than the time fit. This is how I do it always. But I like having more. So let me share the presentation for a moment. Here. So, because I still have what I sometimes do, this is where I haven't been before. What I sometimes do in groups is, especially also in very emotionally tense groups, that I actually explain schemata. I actually put it on the table. I explain schema collusion. I explain that it's no one's fault. And this opens the room when it happens, especially when schema collusion happened between participants, that we can go on a meta level and actually talk about what has been happening here and how do we go forth from this point. So having a model in your bag to explain such strange interactions helps a lot, because on there I go to, I don't know whether you are intimate or you know the model from Antonovsky about salutogenesis. It is one of the pillars of feeling coherent is understanding, and to give people something, a way to understand what is happening with us and with me, usually takes the heat out of the situation in a very, 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 very profound way. So this is something I do. I actually explain if I feel, oh dear, we're running in circles again and again. They are pushing their buttons again and again. And also, if necessary, I offer one-on-one coaching, but this is out of the group session. I offer one-on-one coaching. And there are, of course, interventions for coaches too that help them to regulate their own stress reactions. But there's a whole bunch of how to work with stress, so I won't go into this. We have developed, from the schema point of view, we have developed interventions, a lot of them that work very well, but this would be a one-on-one work. This is not related to groups. So, and with this, I actually would like make a point on today, and yes, hand over to you for like a short round. What do you take with you, and are there questions I still could clarify at this point?
Thank you very much, Maike. I'm thinking about an experience I had a few weeks ago of my favourite exercise, you know, the reflective listening exercise, which I've done with tens of thousands of people, probably, well, at least thousands. And for the first time ever, I put together two people that were in conflict, which was a bit risky. And the one just could not hear the other and was just projecting entirely what the other person was saying. And yeah, it certainly makes sense through the lens of, her achievement schema and the threat she was experiencing and so forth. So, yeah, thank you. I found this very interesting.
Thank you. Who do you hand over to?
Pip.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Maike. That was a brilliant suggestion about the acknowledging the person in need while continuing to work with the whole group. And then, if the whole group is looking at the person in need, then turning to them to ask what they need. I thought that was genius. I'd love to try it. And thank you. All of it was great. Yeah, thank you. I'll hand to Lucy.
Thanks, Pip. Yeah, thanks, Maike. I just loved that. I thought it just lifted my practice a whole new level, and I'd love to read more. And Annika's getting to know me well enough to know that just adds another book on top of the pile of 20 that I'm trying to, and another course and another thing I'm fascinated by. But it's definitely going to be up there on the priority list. And I have to confess, are we still recording? This is going to help my marriage as well, I think. So thank you. I'll pass to Leanne.
Thanks, Lucy. What was I going to say? Yeah, look, I mean, just reiterating what I said before, it just, I don't know, rounds out a whole lot of, wondering that I had about, so where does it, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, so this is really interesting for me. But also, it will help me be more compassionate, I think. Another layer of compassion, yay. No, it's a good thing. To whatever's going on in any given situation, really. It's just about understanding, really, isn't it? So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I will pass to Annika.
Annika.
Yeah, it's just 1 minute before the next meeting. So thank you so much. I really like being in this group. So that was once again a great experience. And I love putting models together, and it works so well to put that into the matrix and see it through that lens and apply things. So the matrix is just a great container for so many other models. So this is so wonderful. So I'm very much looking forward to merge and to reiterate and to go the adaptive rounds, evolutionary, to put models together and create something new. Thank you.
Yes. So
yeah, and I hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you. Have a good meeting. So thank you very much for participating and for your questions and your attention. And I'd love to continue on this journey of putting models together, and looking forward to working with you in different constellations and in different times. Have a wonderful time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.